Okay, so you want to win a Grand Slam. 14 days, 7 matches, one trophy lifted on center court, while a crowd of thousands stands and applauds, and a global broadcast beams the moment into hundreds of millions of homes. It looks like the purest kind of achievement in sports, one match at a time, best player wins. Here is what that trophy ceremony does not show you. The decade of spending that happened before that player ever won a single professional match. The team of 5 or 6 people whose salaries were being paid every single month, while the ranking sat outside the top 200 and the prize money barely covered plane tickets. And the uncomfortable math that most fans never think about, that winning a Grand Slam is not really the payoff for a single brilliant fortnight. It is the payoff, if it ever arrives at all, for one of the most expensive and financially risky development pipelines in all of professional sports. Before we talk about the prize check, we need to talk about what it actually costs to build a player capable of winning one, because this is where almost the entire financial story lives, and it starts far earlier than most people assume. Elite junior development, the specialized coaching, travel to international junior tournaments, and access to a structured academy environment routinely runs anywhere from $25,000 to over $100,000 a year for a serious prospect between the ages of 10 and 18. Multiply that across 8 to 10 years of development before a player even turns professional, and a family or a backing organization can easily have invested somewhere between $200,000 and $1 million before that athlete has earned a single dollar of prize money as a professional. This is not an exaggeration built for dramatic effect. It is simply what it costs to produce a technically complete, physically conditioned, mentally prepared 18-year-old capable of competing at the bottom rungs of professional tennis, let alone contending for a Grand Slam a decade later. Then the professional grind begins, and this is the phase that quietly destroys more promising careers than injuries ever do. A player breaking into the professional ranks typically needs a core team just to function on tour, a coach, and increasingly a fitness trainer and a physiotherapist, all traveling with the player to tournaments around the world. A modest professional support team, coach, plus one additional staff member, commonly runs $100,000 to $250,000 a year once you account for salaries, travel, accommodation, and tournament entry costs for the entire group. Not just the player. Add flights across multiple continents throughout the season, hotel stays in some of the most expensive cities in the world during tournament weeks, equipment, stringing services, and the entry fees and travel required simply to compete in the lower tier events. A young player needs to accumulate ranking points and total annual operating costs for a professional player genuinely competing, not just entering a handful of events, but building a real ranking, commonly land somewhere between $150,000 and $400,000 a year before the player has necessarily earned anywhere close to that amount back. Here is the brutal statistic that sits underneath this entire business, and it is the reason so few players who reach the professional tour ever get anywhere near a Grand Slam final. Prize money in professional tennis is extraordinarily top-heavy. A player ranked outside the top 150 in the world frequently operates at a financial loss once travel, coaching, and support staff costs are subtracted from prize money earned, even while competing at a level that would be considered extraordinary athletic achievement in almost any other context. The gap between what a player ranked 50 in the world earns and what a player ranked 500 earns is not proportional to the difference in skill between them. It is a canyon, because tournament prize money is weighted overwhelmingly toward deep runs in the biggest events, and a player who loses in the first or second round of most tournaments they enter, which describes the overwhelming majority of the professional field in any given week, earns a fraction of what reaching the later rounds pays out. This is why the Grand Slams themselves occupy such an outsized place in the sport's entire economic structure. The 4 majors pay dramatically more than any other event on the calendar, both in total prize pool and in the amount awarded even for an early round exit. A first-round loss at a Grand Slam alone can pay more than winning an entire lower-tier event elsewhere on the calendar. This is precisely why players structure their entire season around qualifying for and performing at these 4 specific weeks. They are not just the most prestigious events. They are disproportionately the events that make an entire year financially viable. Now let's talk about what actually happens financially the moment a player wins one. The prize money for the champion at a major tournament is substantial, commonly in the range of $2 to $3 million for singles champions at the biggest events. A genuinely transformative sum for almost any player outside the very elite tier who has spent years operating at break-even or a loss. But here is the detail that separates tennis economics from almost every other sport we have covered on this channel. The prize check itself, as large as it is rarely the primary financial event triggered by winning a major. It is the ignition switch for something much larger. Endorsement value is where the real transformation happens, and it happens almost instantly. A player's marketability, the base guarantees, bonus structures, and equipment deals a brand is willing to offer is tied directly to results at the biggest events, because sponsors are ultimately purchasing broadcast exposure, and nothing generates broadcast exposure like a Grand Slam title. A player who wins their first major frequently sees existing sponsorship contracts trigger substantial bonus payments written into the deal specifically for this outcome, and simultaneously becomes eligible to renegotiate every existing agreement at dramatically higher rates, because the underlying asset, media exposure, and brand association has just been permanently upgraded. It is common for a maiden Grand Slam champion to see their total annual endorsement income increase by several multiples within the following 12 months, a swing that frequently dwarfs the actual prize money earned from the tournament itself. Appearance fees follow a similar pattern. Many exhibition events and some non-mandatory tournaments pay top players guaranteed fees simply to show up and compete, entirely separate from prize money, and those fees scale directly with a player's drawing power. A newly minted Grand Slam champion commands appearance fees that were simply unavailable to them the week before the final, because tournament organizers are purchasing the same thing sponsors are purchasing: the guarantee of a crowd and a broadcast audience that a major title now reliably delivers. Let's build the two honest scenarios, because the financial gap here is enormous, and it explains why so much of the sport's economics concentrate around such a small number of players. The good outcome. A player breaks through in their early 20s after roughly a decade of development costs, totaling somewhere around $600,000, and several years of professional operating costs, running at or near break-even. They win their first major. Prize money for the title alone covers a meaningful chunk of the debt effectively accumulated across those lean years. But the real payoff arrives over the following 12 months. Endorsement renegotiations, new sponsorship categories opening up entirely, appearance fee invitations, and a jump in ranking that increases every subsequent tournament's prize money floor. Within a year of that single title, total annual income, prize money plus endorsements plus appearances combined, can easily run into 8 figures for a player whose income the year before the breakthrough was a fraction of that. The trophy did not just pay for itself, it fundamentally reset the entire economic trajectory of the career. The harder outcome, and statistically the far more common one. A player follows the same development path, the same 6-figure junior investment, the same years of professional grinding at break-even, reaches a Grand Slam semifinal, or even a final genuinely elite achievement by any reasonable standard, but never crosses the line to an actual title. The consolation prize money is still substantial. Semifinal and final finishes at majors pay well into 6 figures even without winning. But the qualitative jump in endorsement value that comes specifically from being able to say champion rather than finalist simply does not activate the same way. Sponsors renew at improved but incremental rates rather than exponential ones. Appearance fee offers increase modestly rather than transformatively. The player remains financially comfortable, often genuinely wealthy by any normal standard, but never crosses into the tier where a career changes shape entirely on the back of a single fortnight. The difference between these two outcomes is frequently a handful of points across 2 or 3 matches, and the financial gap it produces over a career can run into tens of millions of dollars. This asymmetry, where the difference between finalist and champion produces a financial outcome wildly disproportionate to the difference in on-court performance, is the single most distinctive feature of Grand Slam economics compared to almost any other major sporting property. A shopping mall does not suddenly become worth 10 times more because occupancy went from 98 to 99%. A bank's valuation does not jump exponentially because its return on equity improved by 1 percentage point. But tennis, because its entire commercial structure is built around the outsized cultural weight of exactly 4 events a year, and around a very specific word, champion, that unlocks endorsement categories and appearance tiers unavailable to anyone who merely came close, produces exactly this kind of threshold effect, where marginal athletic improvement translates into nonlinear, sometimes irrational seeming financial reward. So does winning a Grand Slam actually pay for itself as a business proposition? The honest answer is that the trophy itself, the $2 to $3 million check, is almost a rounding error compared to what actually gets unlocked around it. The real return on the decade of junior investment and the years of break-even professional grinding is not the prize money at all. It is the permanent reclassification from promising player to proven champion, a label that reorganizes every subsequent sponsorship negotiation, appearance fee conversation, and career trajectory that follows. For the small handful of players each year who cross that threshold, the economics of an entire career get rewritten in the 2 weeks it takes to win 7 matches. For everyone else, including players who came agonizingly close, the extraordinary investment and years of sacrifice simply have to be recovered the slower way, tournament by tournament, ranking point by ranking point, hoping that one more deep run finally tips the math in their favor.